Brandy, it's
Yeah,
been a long time.
yeah.
Do you remember what year that was that you did the contest that I went to in Puerto Escondido?
That was 2007.
Okay, yeah, so it's been a minute. And where are you in the world right now? And did you surf today?
I did not surf today. I am actually up close to Yosemite, up to the park. Yeah, in California, up in the mountains in the Sierra Nevadas. So there's definitely no waves up here.
And how long have you been living in that part of the world?
I've actually been up here for 4 years. I wound up here in 2020. I've done a lot since I've seen you. I became a registered nurse and I work in the emergency department. And I was travel nursing when COVID hit. And I was working through the cities and decided I didn't want to be doing that through COVID. And so came up to the mountains, work a little critical access hospital, bought a piece of land and built a house up here.
Wow.
Yeah.
And and did you leave Mexico and go straight to that, or was there something in the middle?
No, I left Mexico and went to San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Cool.
went to San
Well,
Diego, yeah, with the boys and yeah, there's been lots of adventure, lots of change. But I do go back to Mexico. The last time I was in the water was actually last year this time. I was down in Puerto for Christmas with the boys. They both live down there. And I actually had a hip replacement a couple of years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. Was suffering pretty heavily with some osteoarthritis and just wear and tear. When I went in to get the surgery, the nurses said, "Oh my God, what have you what have you done?" And I'm like, "What have I not done?" They're like, "You wore that thing totally out." So I'd been out of the water already for a while. I got that replaced, and then last year was the first time I got back in the water, and I paddled out and I was sitting on this like 6'4", but it was like super wide, and just sitting on it was just awkward. And I was like, man, I gotta get a special board for this and rethink the whole thing. But I'm pretty excited about getting back in the water, and it's timely that we're hooking up and talking about surf because I think I'm about ready to move back to Mexico.
amazing. Yeah, I
So,
was going to ask you how has it been like shifting from living your life in a surf beach town, like everything revolving around the surf, to being landlocked?
well, landlocked is not good. I mean, I originally I'm from Canada. I grew up in Canada, but I moved to Mexico when I was really young. I was a skater in Canada. I think every skater dreams of being a surfer. So I was like, yeah, let's go to Puerto Escondido. I didn't realize that was probably the worst place in the world to learn. But, I wound up there with a friend of mine and my brother, and we hung out there, and that's when I met my husband. And come hell or high water and through lots of hard knocks and sheer determination, somehow learned. And yeah, I was there footloose and fancy free for so long, and then it was a definite culture shock moving back into kind of mainstream, and not just like landlocked. It's even more intense. But even San Diego, which is I was in Ocean Beach. I was there, and the kids were in school and they had surf PE and yoga and everything super cool, but it still was so rigid in just the way that it's organized compared to what I was used to. It took a while, and then I got into nursing, which is even more rigid because your rules and regulations, and the badging in and badging out and turning and everything's on time. And yeah, it's been a big, big change for sure. But interesting. Never a dull moment. Lots of learning.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, let's talk more. I want to hear more about your story. So, how old were you when you first moved to Mexico? And can you talk about the love story of when you first met your husband and what that was like to be in Puerto Escondido as a woman back in that era? Like, set us in time. Like, what year was that, and what was it like?
Well, that was in 1991. And I was 20, and I just had a backpack and a skateboard, and a tent. And had planned on just staying for a kind of unlimited amount of time, as long as the money would last, or as long as I could get more money sent if I could sell things back home or whatever. So yeah, I was there hanging out on the beach one morning watching the waves, and Joe came out of the water, and I saw him just kind of like a god. He had this like long curly hair, and he's all muscular and gorgeous, and he comes up and he'd ripped his shorts, and he looks at me, believe it or not, and he's like, "What are you gonna do about this?" And I was like, "What? I don't even know you. And what do you mean, what am I going to do?" And the funny thing is that I had been a seamstress in Canada. I'd, done that. And I worked in a theater company and did costuming. And that was my background, was sewing. So I was like, this is, okay, I guess I'll fix them for you. So he had this little palapa on the beach where he sold tortas and orange juice and beer, and had hammocks, and people get together in the evenings and play music and kind of hang out. And so I offered to him, I noticed that the waves were much better in the morning. And even though I was a total novice, I had no idea, but I could see that the conditions changed at a certain time when the wind changed. And I said to him, "Hey, I'll make you a trade. I'll look after your restaurant early in the morning so you get the good conditions, and you teach me how to surf." So that's how we got to know each other. Meanwhile, I went up to town, found a seamstress, and got his trunks fixed, and that's how the romance kind of began. Yeah, then we were married for 17 years and had 2 kids and built MexPipe, and yeah, so that's how we met.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I went to Puerto Escondido for the first time. I think it was like my first year of college, so it would have been 90. I think I went in like the winter of like 98 into 99. And I remember going to your shop. In fact, I still have a pair of MexPipe board shorts that I bought that very first trip. And I remember Quetzal was like just a baby. He was like in your arms. I don't know what year was he born? Is this all making sense?
Yeah, he was born in 93, so I don't think he would have been in my arms still.
Okay. Maybe he was running around. Or you have two, maybe it was the younger one?
Maybe
Question
it
mark?
was Troy in 2000. He would have
Okay.
been, yeah, in my arms.
Okay.
But
So yeah,
I
maybe it
think
was maybe it was 2000 instead of 99.
I think the first time, just back up a sec, are those the ones that lace up in the back?
No,
Or no?
they're in the front.
I made some that lace up in the back, the very first ones, because I was like, wax gets in them and, it's all uncomfortable, whatever. I'll just lace them up in the back. So the very first ones were laced up in the back. They're pretty cool. But didn't I meet you the first time when you came with Jim Rusey and we
Yeah.
did that shoot for Surfing Girl? We went
Exactly. Yeah, that was the
down.
first time I went down there. So I'm trying to remember what year that was, but I know I had just started college, so it was in that like late 90s.
Yeah.
time frame. And I remember like you as the only woman out there, or at least the only woman that I saw surfing out there.
Yeah, I was the only woman on a surfboard for years and years and years. There was Anna, who was from Brazil, who was charging on a bodyboard. And then there was also Virginia, who was from Argentina, who was out there on a bodyboard. But really, for years, it was just me and Anna. She was on the bodyboard and I was on the surfboard, and that was it for a long time. Yeah. Yeah.
And what was that like, surfing those waves as the only woman, having only like learned to, I mean, you wouldn't have been surfing for very long. Like, you learned to surf at Puerto Escondido, and then how quickly did you progress out into actually riding those waves?
Well, you know what? It probably took me forever to even get out past the break. And then once I did get out past the break, it took me forever to be able to catch a wave. I mean, we're talking months and months. I mean, I must have been maybe like 5 months at one step and then maybe another at the next step of actually catching a wave, because I would just go ass over tea kettle just over the falls, right? Over and over and over and over again. And I remember the guys, just the looks on their faces, because I was like, I'm fine. I'm fine. And they would be like, the looks on their faces were startling, because they were just like, oh my God, you know? So you see like the mirror in other people's expressions, but I didn't feel the same way at all. I just didn't. I must have been, I don't know, I was young and foolish. I didn't realize how dangerous it was. I was just, I don't know but I mean, so that took a long time. And honestly, for me to progress, I feel like I really didn't until I started to go down south to Barra de la Cruz. Yeah, we would take trips down there and we would, stay for a week at a time kind of deal. And that's when my surfing really progressed to a level that was competent, um enough to actually catch some waves out there, in the Mexican pipeline, and actually, have some fun. Not just get work so hard.
Yeah, I think it's funny that your conception of like, oh yeah, it took me forever, like 5 months, like, whereas like anybody else who had only been surfing 5 months, there would be no way you'd expect them to be, out past the break at a wave like Puerto Escondido. Like, for people that don't know what that wave is like, can you describe a little bit about the setting?
Well, it's a beach break, so it's so shifty. And so the channels are constantly shifting, and where it's going to break is shifting. And it takes a lot of watching from the ocean to notice how it's shifting and when the right time to paddle out is. And I think that might be, I don't want to say for all females, but I know in my case, it was something that helped me be able to get out past the break, was the observation. So I would be able to get out just by really observing how the channels were working, how everything was shifting, and my timing. But that many occasions got me way, way into trouble and way over my head, where I could not get back out. Not like back in, not so bad, actually, in Cicatela, but that did get me into trouble and really heavy surf down at the point where I could not. I mean, I was like, I was like, how did I even get out here? It's getting dark. There's nobody else out. I have no choice but just to try and paddle back in, and just, yeah, wound up almost nearly drowning for sure. But that was because of, being able to judge the right timing, like now, but not to judge, I think, correctly, the right level of ability to surf. I don't know,
Right.
but yeah.
I mean, for those that don't realize, Zicatela, Puerto Escondido is a really, really big. It's a beach break that gets really, really big. So you can think about like a place like Ocean Beach or Blacks, or places like that where it just the waves can be very, very big. So all of that water coming in then creates these radical riptides and currents. So if you
Yeah.
were to time it right and put yourself in that riptide, it'll suck you out.
We just
Where
out there.
like a different beach break, you know, if you couldn't handle duck diving, you wouldn't be able to make it out. But here it's like it'll just suck you out, and then you're out there like, oh my god, how do I get back to the beach?
Yeah, that's for sure. And then, I mean, when I was more confident and could be out there and did judge wisely when I should be out there, the wave is just so fast, is what it is, and it's shallow. So it's, anywhere whenever you think, I have this much time to drop in, or I should be paddling at this point in the wave, in order to be able to get in fast enough, I would have to, considering my size and strength, actually kind of be on the shoulder or where it was almost already breaking in order to get enough speed to actually drop in and catch it. So it was always in the critical kind of part of the wave. It wasn't like the guy surfing out there that would be paddling in, deeper and kind of dropping in with it and then lining up and doing that nice bottom turn and then lining up, and waiting for it to cover. I was just always in the kind of critical part of the wave. So it was just always so fast. As soon as you feel like you're being pushed at all, then it was like stand up really fast. It's just so fast. It's faster than anyone could ever imagine.
And over the years of surfing there, did you feel like you got to the point where you were confident out there and were pulling into barrels?
I definitely got to the point where I was feeling confident out there. I wasn't consistently pulling into barrels. I was lucky enough to have some really good sessions that at least were photographed, which was cool. But it I would go out, probably the most comfortable for me was like 6 to 8 feet, kind of was like fun. That was kind of like a fun, kind of like my comfort zone, And then if it was like 10 to 12, then I would be like excited, and I'd pull out my gun was like 7.4, and that was like the biggest, board that I would ride. But yeah, I mean, I got comfortable. I wasn't, surfing the huge waves, but I was surfing, like I said, whatever your medium days, kind of small days, I guess, 6 to 8.
And I know that your son Quetzal, at least, is now one of the best surfers at Puerto Escondido. I mean, I follow him on Instagram and see him posting amazing waves all the time. Does your other son surf as well?
No, he hasn't gotten into surfing. He loves to skateboard. He spent a lot more time up in San Diego. When we went up to San Diego, he was younger. And so they have the skate park there and everything. I think the water is cold, and he just, didn't get so much into surfing as Quetzal did, who was born, kind of into it and started surfing that wave down there when he was, I mean, literally, we have pictures of him when he was months old, standing him up on a board kind of thing. So for him, it's kind of like his living room. Sometimes I see him, and he drops into waves and it looks like he's sitting on the couch at home or something. So yeah.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what it's like to see him out there in the like giant waves. Like, do you feel nervous for him, or are you confident in his abilities?
I'm very confident in his abilities. And you know, I do I do notice a change in my perspective the more I'm away from watching that wave. And I marvel sometimes at that change in perspective, because when I was living down there full time and I was surfing it, and I would go and get him out of school, I kind of break him out of school. And we were lucky that way because he was, he had all the trophies and stuff. And so at school, they wanted to have the trophies at the school. And so I'd say, you know what, surf's up. He needs to train. So I would go and get him, and we'd be out there together. And before you knew it, he'd be catching more waves than me. And then after that, well, at one point he had to block for me so I could catch waves. It was like, come on, go block, let your old lady catch a wave. So, and I never really I never thought about the danger. I just didn't. It didn't occur to me because it was just a family sport. It was just a way of life, and it really didn't. And then I guess the older I get, and probably working in emergency department doesn't help much, the more aware I am of the dangers. And so, yeah, there's, around the year medevac membership in place, and absolutely know what trauma center he would be flown to and everything. So on that side, yeah, there's those safety nets in place as well, for sure. Yeah.
Talk about what it was like building your business and your brand MexPipe while you were down there.
Well, we were living without any electricity, and Joe was captain of the lifeguards, and that was all volunteer, and we were building that lifeguard the headquarters that's there, on the beach, the cement building, in association with the Life Saving Association of the United States. But it was all volunteer, so there was a lot of work going on without any money. And so I was a seamstress, and I started to make one-offs. I thought, well, I'll make custom made board shorts, and I had an extension cord from my neighbors. So my neighbors would lend me electricity, and I brought my sewing machine down from Canada after, I decided to stay in Mexico. I'd gone home and kind of got rid of everything and packed up, and the only thing I kept was a sewing machine and a serger. So I brought those down. So I started to try and make custom made board shorts, but they were terrible. They were just terrible because the closures and everything, and they're so funny because I would hand paint them, and inside I paint like "I love you, Jose" and stuff, and they're all made with all this love, but they're just so funny. And then slowly but surely, they got better, and they got better. And then I put a shop, and then another shop, and it just slowly evolved like that. I got somebody working with me who was an assistant, and then I was able to just do the cutting, and she'd do the sewing, and then we got another seamstress, and so then I could do the drafting, and somebody else could do the cutting, and then somebody else the sewing. And so we just built up the shop like that, very little by little, kind of very organically. And so, yeah, that's kind of how that went. It was just out of necessity and kind of love for the art of it, and being a maker, and filling a need that was there, in the town. And that's kind of, how it all came together. And then with Joe in the surf industry, he was president of the Surf Association of Oaxaca. So, and captain of the lifeguards. So we were involved in the junior lifeguards, and in the junior competitive, circuit for the state of Oaxaca, to try and get the guys through so that they could go to the nationals, and trying to push that whole thing for the young guys so that they could try and have careers and try and be professional surfers. And so it all kind of came together, as a real labor of love, a family thing. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you were little by little, with your skills and just dedication and hard work, you were able to build a business to support your family, and then alongside Joe, really founding like the organization of like
Yeah.
safety, like helping the lifeguards, but then also giving an
Yeah.
opportunity to the kids as well to be able to compete and all that. And then you eventually held an international surf contest, right? Because I went back again, and I can't remember what year that was, 2007 or 2008 maybe, for the contest.
For the surf challenge, well, we actually started to do surf events in, I think it would have been 97. It was after the Oxbow Masters, because the Oxbow Masters, I think, was 96 or something. And Joe was working as like an assistant director on that event. And actually that was life-changing for us, because we met all the masters. I mean, they were all in one place, and that was back in the day of the ASP. And it was like, I think the ASP was in the States at that time, and they wanted to take it back to Australia, or it was in Australia, they want to take it back to the States. I don't know, I can't remember. But the conversations, I mean, I met Ian Kearns and I met all the masters, but I think he was, you know, running the ASP back then. And really learned how to coordinate events and how to work on the formatting and the tabulating and lots of forward thinking and ideas. That's when we met Tim Williams, who was, I believe it was head judge that year. And so there was a lot of conversations at night about tabulation and figuring out everybody who was seating and if they should be seated or what was going on. And so we just learned a lot through that experience and made a lot of contacts and just kind of beautiful moments, aha kind of moments. And then Tim Williams decided to stay in Puerto. Actually, a lot of those guys stayed for quite a while. And he stayed at our house. And then he told us we should have a MexPipe event. So our first event was like a spin-off of that Masters. It was born out of that whole experience. And it was really fun because we didn't have any money to do it. And we had a big party at one of the local restaurants called Cabo Blanco, which was back in the day. They had a party like every week. And everybody came together, and like somebody brought fish and barbecued, other people bring beer, other people bring water. And so what we did is we put it all together. We had an open bar and we sold tickets. And so amongst us, like just the core community through that made enough money to throw that first surf event. And that was the first one. And we had the judging panel on top of that truck. Remember that big truck we had? Because we went together in that truck to do those photo shoots, right? For the surfing girl.
Right.
Well, we had like a big stage on the top of it because it had a rack from the very front of it all the way to the back. And it was that huge like 350 Ford lifted whatever pickup. And so we just like built the stage on top of that. And we could move it wherever the waves were. It was so funny. It's like, go down the beach. Oh, they're better down here. Better down here. And so that was the first. And we held it every year, actually, from 90, I want to say 97, through pretty much up until that 2007. It's just that year in 2007 was the first year that we had a women's category. And then it was like a QS, a 1-star. And so that was a huge progression, that was the women's category we had that year.
Yeah, I remember, because that was in, the old days of professional surfing. Like now I feel like with the WSL, like there's a lot more equality, right? There's equal prize money, and there's at least more of an effort made to get the women out into more equal wave conditions. But that was still back in the era of the contest where, when the waves were good, they put the boys out. And when the wind turned onshore and the tide got too low, they put the girls out. And I remember it was so amazing because at the contest that you ran, you were like, no, the girls are getting the best conditions. And I had gone down there with Kim and Kyla, like my friends that we had traveled competing, and we were all just like, oh my God, Brandy is amazing. Like she's actually giving the girls the priority. It was the first time I had ever, had a female contest director that was really prioritizing the women.
Yeah, girls go first. Yeah, that was fun. I used to compete with all the guys like many of my generation did. before there were any female categories. And I remember one event down in Puerto where they did have a female category. They were like, yeah, okay, you girls can surf, but there's no prize money. And there was a huge purse for the men, and there was a huge purse for the bikini contest. Plus, the winner of the bikini contest got to go to, like, I don't know, Cancun or something, and a big bunch of money and everything. And we're like, wait, what? So we couldn't figure out how to manage this because we were so pissed off, and we didn't want to have like a negative, vibe about it all because, it's a surf contest, whatever. So we tried to put a spin on it. So we come up with this idea to do transparent shorts. So MexPipe made a whole bunch of transparent shorts. And they were made out of that thin kind of plastic you put on like top of tablecloths or whatnot, that vinyl. So, and they were exactly like the other trunks that I made, same patterns and everything. And they were transparent, and we did a big fundraiser, and we said, okay, guys, if this is what you want to see, we will wear bikinis under our shorts, and you can see the butts paddling out and whatever. And so we did a fundraiser on the radio and everything. Boy, did it cause a huge scandal. It was wonderful. We raised so much money. So there was a big purse for the girls, and that was fun. That was really
Wow,
fun.
that's amazing.
Yeah.
What a great marketing idea.
Yeah, it was fun.
Epic.
Yeah. But Quetzal's down, and my younger son Troy, they're running the store down there now. Quetzal got pissed at me for a bit. Talk about landlocked. I made him go to the Art Institute in North Hollywood. He got a bachelor degree there, a Bachelor of Science in Digital Cinema and Video Production. And so he was in LA for, a few years doing that. And he made it through and everything, and I think it's helping him out now. He's working with the World Surf League, announcing. He announces the top 44 in Spanish, and and is looking forward to, I think, moving on with them into some other positions, and he's prepared to do it because of that education. But boy, he was upset with me during that time. And he actually is working on a surf film that is called Landlocked. And I think it is like edited with a lot of his time there. The poor guy, but he made it through. So hopefully one day we'll see that one.
Yeah, nice. I mean, that's a great way to channel his frustrations into something creative, it sounds like.
Yeah. You survived.
I don't know if you want to go there, but are you willing to talk about what happened to Joe?
Yeah,
It's up to you.
was,
You don't have to if you don't feel comfortable sharing about it or you don't want to go into it.
Well, it's just one of those very unexpected. It was unexpected. It was an unexpected death. He was in Mexico City, and he'd been in Puerto, and he was on his way up to San Diego, and he was supposed to be on a plane the next day. And he was spending the night at a friend of ours' place, and he had developed some asthma. And I think the elevation change and the temperature change really caused him to go into an asthma attack, but they call it status asthmaticus, where your airways actually shut down, and they shut down really fast. And per his friend, they'd gone to the pharmacy and they'd bought some injection, steroids. It's a different system in Mexico City, and also he was very proud, which was a mistake on his part. And here, of course, with anything like that going on, you would go straight into the nearest emergency department. There, it can be better, can be worse, perhaps, depending on the individual and their decision-making process. but they sell you steroids so that you can do your own injections. And he did have a nebulizer, so he figured he'd be okay, I guess. So he was going through that, and his airway just wasn't opening. And unfortunately, I really don't understand what happened as far as why our friend didn't throw him in a car and take him to the hospital. I don't know why. I really can't explain that. Maybe it happened too fast. Panic perhaps settled in. I don't know. But I do know that an ambulance never arrived. And so he died. And it's just it was just such a huge shock because it was just so unexpected. I mean, we were supposed to pick him up at the airport the next day, so we were just, yeah, it was a huge, huge, huge shock in our lives. You just never expect to be left as sole provider of your children, in the sense that you're alone. Like it's a very I don't even know. I don't have the words to express, how it feels. To this day, I keep wondering where he went. It's like, where are you? It's not, and no matter how many years go by, it still feels the same. People might say that, oh, with, time it heals. It really doesn't. And, I mean, it might change. It's not as raw and you're not in tears day in and day out. But that loss and that vacuum of that person being gone, that never changes. It never ever changes. So, yeah. So, yeah, there were huge, huge, huge funerals in Puerto. We did a huge paddle out and, like Aztec ceremony and drumming out in the water and, just like opening up the sky and closing it down again, which the Aztecs do. And some of our friends are dancers down there. And so, there was all kinds of beautiful music played and just a lot of love and light and mourning that happened. It kind of rippled around the surf community because he was so active, within that community. And so it was a huge loss. It still is. So,
And
yeah.
you were living in San Diego at this point, and he was coming to be with you all.
He was coming to be with us. So it's kind of a bit of a Greek tragedy because, he was just, he packed up everything and got everything organized and had, like a whole job in place and everything. And we were just ready to receive him. And it was just a complete unexpected curveball. Yeah.
And how were you able to then go on and be because it sounds like, I'm guessing your family is in Canada, and then it sounds like you were so connected to the community in Mexico. So did you think about like going back to Mexico, or you stayed in San Diego?
No, I stayed in San Diego. Mexico in those days, there was the war on drugs was going on. So with that war on drugs that happened, the cartels got pushed down south. And there were literally tanks in the streets and everything in Juarez and Tijuana. And people kind of forget about that. But it was a time, people think now it's gnarly with the cartels. Not so much. It's really not. I mean, it's probably less gnarly now than it was back in those days. It's just talked about more now, maybe. I don't know. But that was a really bad time because I guess the United States and the DA, I don't know what was going on, but they officially called it the war on drugs. And that war on drugs caused a lot of violence in Mexico, like really bad. And so, in Acapulco, they were literally using the ice trucks for bodies because there was shooting in the streets and it was like a war zone. It was a war zone. Kids trying to get to school. They had to take specific routes because there was crossfire in certain places and people knew. And in Puerto, we started to see all kinds of vehicles show up that had never been in town. It had always been kind of the sleepy surfer village. And suddenly there were big black Suburbans with tinted windows and kind of like militia, paramilitary people getting out of them and looking around and hanging out. You just really felt a presence. And there was kidnappings were starting to happen. And I personally had friends that were kidnapped and didn't come back, and, all kinds of just violence was going on and it was dangerous. And so, that's one of the reasons that I left. It's the only reason I left. I would not have left otherwise. It was just too dangerous. And, the way that I'm a white woman with the business on the beach and the two Mexicans, which, they're white Mexicans, and it's just, it was unsafe. It felt pretty scary. So, yeah, I felt like San Diego was just kind of like one step over the border. It wasn't too far. It was close enough, to home where we could still visit, go back and forth. And Joe, while he got organized enough to come up and be with us, he could come and go and kind of thing. And so that's how I was thinking. And that's and when he finally was going to come up and do that with us, that's when he died. So I wasn't thinking I was going to go back and be there by myself, in that kind of atmosphere. And the kids, they were in good schools. We were in Ocean Beach. So Quetzal was in Point Loma High School, which was great. And Troy was in the Ocean Beach Elementary. And, I just stayed there and actually really enjoyed Southern California quite a bit. Actually, I really, really liked it. It was really good to us, Southern California. Really enjoyed San
Yeah.
Diego.
Ocean Beach has a cool community vibe. I've spent a little bit of time there, and it really is like, even though, Southern California is huge and San Diego is huge, I feel like Ocean Beach is a little nook that it has a community vibe.
It really does. It has a community vibe and it has a family vibe. I mean, it's been there since the hippies and it may have this kind of reputation of like hippies and party and whatnot and so forth. And you know what? It's really community oriented. It's really family oriented. The schools, the skate park, the different summer camps, the YMCA was incredible for us. Immediately became YMCA members. And so there was somewhere to hang out for summer camps and for swimming and for the gym and for whatever, and they had a 6 to 6 program. So I could have the little one in, like before school and after school. And it was just really supportive. It was a really great place to raise the kids. Actually, it was wonderful. So that was good.
And
Yeah.
were you able to find any meaning? I know I haven't lost a partner. I can't even imagine what that would be like, especially, you guys had fallen in love young and had 2 kids and all of that. But having lost a sibling, I know that part of the grief process is trying to find some meaning making. Like, can you find any sort of meaning in losing him?
I wish I could say yes. And honestly, I think I'm probably I have a very different perspective since I went into nursing, and I actually was studying nursing when he died and was about to graduate. And I read his autopsy report, just like in my last semester. And, as a new nurse, I still thought maybe I'd find meaning. Honestly, after all these years and working in the emergency department, and it might sound, I don't know, I wish I could find meaning, but the longer I witness life and death and people dying, and it's just so inevitable and all part of it, and we all die, and that's the only for sure thing that I know. And I think I've grown accustomed to it. It's the people that are left behind that suffer more. I'm sure. I mean, I think that that's true. And do that looking for meaning and trying to figure out, what it all means. And unfortunately, I haven't found any meaning. I actually don't. I don't know. No, I haven't. I'm sorry. I haven't found any meaning to it
No, there's
at
no
all.
apology needed. Just asking how you. It's always
Yeah.
interesting to hear. I think most of us have lost someone, and as you
Yeah.
say, we all will eventually. So it can be helpful sometimes to hear the different ways of dealing with that. Like something that is so impossible to deal with. How do
I
we how
know.
do we move through it?
Yeah. I don't know. Honestly, for me, how to move through it, of course, was, it's my children, and the life that we have to live and enjoy and experience and grow, and sort of do the most we can contribute to whatever's positive, and whatever we can do to keep learning and being open enough, in this life and in this world and this experience that we're having, to keep growing and contributing. So that's how I get through it, but I don't spend a lot of time trying to figure out the meaning of people dying. I do know that sometimes accidents happen that have absolutely no meaning. In his case, I feel like he could have possibly avoided it by being more careful with his health, and that bothers me. Because I feel there was a certain amount of maybe cockiness or pride, that was detrimental to his well-being. So that's something that is a hard lesson for sure. I'm sorry you lost a sibling. Have you found any meaning?
I mean, I think that like you, like it was an accident, and it's hard. Like I struggled for a long time with anger at her for
Yeah.
making the choices that she made that put her in that situation, for sure. But I think that the meaning that I can find in it is just to, very similar to you actually, that life is fragile and you never know what's going to happen, and so the lesson is to just be present, and obviously you have to plan for the future, but also not to the exclusion of like focusing on the good that's right in front of you, and the people that you love. And um that's, I guess, meaning, it's like the meaning versus the lesson. Like that's, I think, the lesson that I've taken from it. Like the anger that I still do have, like I'd be lying if I said I've completely let go of the anger at the choices that she made that led to her death, but trying to let that go, and just find the joy in what is here, because who knows how much longer any of us have.
Yeah, it definitely brings into perspective some of that balance for sure. And I can hear in you what's resonating, and I think you picked up on a bit of my anger still at some of the opportunities that may have been passed up to look after himself a bit better. Um, yeah, yeah. It's hard to let go of some of that. I don't, I don't harbor it, but it definitely is. It's unfortunate when you think of the power that we have. We don't have a ton of power, all kinds of things happen unforeseen, but we do have, the power to try and look after ourselves the best we can, so that our loved ones, can have us too, because we're all connected. Whatever happens to one affects the other, and so, it's we're all connected.
Yeah,
So,
and
yeah,
especially when there's kids involved, right?
that's
It's
what I
like
mean.
that's like
Yeah.
the burden of being a parent is not only are you like looking after your kids, but then there's that extra importance in looking after yourself, because especially when your kids are young, it makes it even more important.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, really? You left me alone to do this. So yeah, there's that side for sure. But I miss him. I miss him. So, but yeah, it's so final, isn't it? It's so final.
And when you were in San Diego, were you able to surf? Like, did it help to
Yeah,
get in the ocean?
I actually was able to surf. In the beginning, before I was going to nursing school and it became so rigorous and all consuming, I actually was surfing quite a bit. And where I did surf and enjoyed surfing was Black's Beach. Of all the beaches that were there, that's the one that I found that was the most familiar. And that wave is also so fast. And the lineup was so crazy and so obnoxious and just hostile, and all these guys, fighting, like literally, like I think there might have even been fist fights out in the water, like ridiculous, and there's no females out. And somehow I was able to catch waves because they were fighting amongst themselves so much that there was times where I would notice where I'd be paddling. I'm like, wait, I'm gonna catch this wave. And before you know it, I'd be going, and they'd be like, what the fuck just happened? And I'd be like, it was that bad. They were just like, I don't know, so distracted with fighting, and you had to paddle through people everywhere. But and maybe because I don't know, I was so comfortable in it because it was also such a fast wave. It's a great wave. I love Black's Beach. So that's where I was surfing most often. Sometimes I just paddle out at the pier there, or there's a jetty on the other side, and that was nice. But there, I don't know, I didn't like it so much. I think when you're used to a certain kind of wave, you just become so particular to that style or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, I was enjoying it for sure. Or else I would go down south. I really like to go down to Imperial Beach. I like that beach down there, even though there's like a bad rap because like all the contamination, whatever. But honestly, all the time I was surfing down there, I never had a problem with anything like that. And the beach is beautiful, and there's just like peaks everywhere and dolphins almost all the time, and hardly any people out. And I just loved it down there. So I was either like way up at Black's or down at Imperial Beach pretty much.
Still looking for those places that are going to beat you up with the power of the ocean.
Yeah. Best lessons learned from the ocean, huh? I
Yeah.
think that,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's a good way, I feel like, for me to like deal with grief too, is like those when you're feeling so much emotion, especially when there's like that anger component and that rage, and then it's like you go out and get up and get beat up by the ocean, and then just come in like, okay, I got some of that. It's like a way to get some of that out, because otherwise you're just holding it in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, that's an interesting thing to think about. Not only letting go of some of your emotion, just through that sheer exertion and that battle that you're having, with the ocean. I'd say one on one, but it's not. It's with the ocean, and that. But at the same time, the ocean teaches you so much. It teaches you all that humility, to not get cocky, Because anytime you get cocky, you're going to pay for it right away. It's like instant karma. The ocean, it's that instant, feedback right away. So lessons learned are just so direct and so fast. And if you can translate it into your everyday life, it's just kind of like your guide. So yeah, I know it definitely
How
helped me with racing kids. So hmm?
how has your approach to surfing changed over the years, if at all?
Well, it's definitely changed now that I'm so much older and after having this hip replacement. I'm telling you, I'm thinking I'm moving back to Mexico probably next, I don't know, but like in the summer or so. I'm getting things lined up. And of course, part of that is my quiver, my quiver, thinking, what is it going to be? And it's definitely going to be longer and softer. And yeah, I'll be moving down south, Puerto Escondido, where the waves are more considerate, perhaps, respects older ladies. And I just want to get out there and kind of, maybe 4 to 6 feet if I can, kind of perfect waves that I might be riding a longboard on, kind of thing. Yeah, something really mellow that I can just kind of hang and be in the trim line there, just kind of like watching the wall come up and all the nice glitter of the sun, kind of thing, and just enjoy something mellow. Yeah, yeah.
That sounds pretty good. That's awesome. I like that. I like that imagery. You'll be down in those right points, sounds like.
You know what? There's a lot of beach breaks down there that actually have peaks. And so I think more looking to some of those where there's less people and more peaks. There's so many virgin waves and beaches down there, you have no idea. There's so many, so I keep it a secret for now, but I got my eye on a place that's pretty nice, and I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. I wish you all the best. And thank you so much for sharing all of your stories.
Well, that's great. Are you living in Uvita?
Yeah. Yeah. I live in Costa Rica now.
I went to Uvita once. I went to Uvita. I guess you've probably heard of that festival Envision.
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. It's like I live literally like right, like up the hill, but right across the street. Like my entrance down the hill to the highway is right across from Envision.
Well, I've been there. I didn't go to the festival to like be a festival goer, but I work with a emergency response team that covers music festivals kind of like all over. And I went to that one in Costa Rica and worked with the medical team. So I camped there in the jungle and was there for like 7 days or whatever. I flew in to Kepos, I guess, in that little 6-seater,
Yeah.
in the Cessna into that little airport, the gravel airport with the tin hut. And
Yeah.
with my hockey bag full of medical gear and went in there and did that festival. So I've been there. I went down onto the beach. There were no waves or anything. It was pretty flat, but it was beautiful. Good Lord, that was a beautiful place. And the water is so clean. I was not familiar with Costa Rica, and I was thinking, oh my God, in the jungle with all these, we're going to have neurovirus. Everyone's going to be puking the water. Oh my God, dysentery. This is going to be horrible. How am I going to survive? What do I need to take? I got there and I was like so uneducated. I didn't realize that like they boast, the cleanest water in the world kind of thing. And so every tap, you just drink water from, and everything was clean and wonderful. And what a beautiful place you've chosen to live. It's just gorgeous.
Yeah, it's a nice spot. And, it's like you make the choices you got to make for your kids. So, of all the places in the world, it's not really where I want to live necessarily. Because like as you said, the waves are not great. I mean, I have fun and it's fun. It's fine. It's totally fine. I'm very
Mhm.
spoiled, probably like you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm very spoiled, and I've lived at a world class waves, so this is just average beach break, which is still
Yeah.
fun. But yeah, it's good for the kids. There's good schools, and there's soccer practice, and there's dance class, and there's a lot of community, there's a lot of families, and so probably similar to the reasons why you moved to San Diego. Well, I guess I'm not escaping cartels, but yeah, it feels like a good place to raise the kids. So I'm looking at it as like I'll be here until they get to an age where it feels like we need something different. I'm hoping that we'll stay here through their high school. They're 8 and 10 now.
Yeah.
So hopefully we get through another 8 to 10 years,
Yeah.
and then we'll see.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I was really impressed with Costa Rica. It was so beautiful and clean, and the people were so friendly, and it just really felt like a real positive um, place to be. Yeah, it felt quite
Yeah.
safe. Yeah, I liked it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. It is all those things. It's pretty expensive though. I actually have some friends of mine who are like older, and I just met a couple people that they're like, yeah, we're moving to Mexico because Costa Rica is too expensive, because it is not cheap to live here.
No, no, I can imagine. I mean, I just for like as a tourist, when I left and I stayed overnight in Quepos before catching a flight in the morning, yeah, I was like, whoa, the hotels had what? I mean, it was more expensive than San Diego, was what it was
Yeah,
there in town. It was more expensive than San Diego. So if you're thinking that, it's going to be any less expensive, it was more for me just to spend the night, within the one night. It was like, wow.
for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But oh
Awesome.
man, so nice to catch up with you.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, you have been an inspiration to me. I remember when I was young and met you, like living in Mexico, and you had your cute little boy, and like
Mhm.
living the dream at the beach with your business. It was like it stood out to me. I was like, wow, like that's cool. And then when I saw you again doing the contest, and you were like prioritizing the women, I was like, yeah, you are always were like in my mind as like a badass, like inspiring woman that I could look up to. So thank you so much
Oh,
for staying connected and sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
oh, that's wonderful. It's wonderful to see you grow into a mother and looking after children and everything after I met that young spunky girl when we were doing those shoots for the Curvas Peligrosas.
Así
So,
es.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's nice.
Awesome. All right,
Okay.
cool. I'm going to hit stop.